Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm your host, Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
I'm Spencer Davis. I'm the editor of the movie and music website shadowsandnoise.com.
Welcome, Spencer. And this week we're going to overanalyze Arrival. So, Arrival is about extraterrestrial spacecraft plant themselves at various locations around the globe. A linguist and a theoretical physicist must find a way to communicate with the mysterious visitors in order to learn what they want and whether they pose a threat to humanity. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, there's absolutely no way to talk about this movie without spoilers. Yep. So... if you don't want to hear any spoilers, you should probably just wait and hear the podcast once you've seen the movie.
And I'd strongly urge that you do that because, I mean, it really would, I think, undercut your ability to appreciate the movie if you know what's coming in this one.
Yeah, definitely. I had no idea. I wasn't even looking for a twist, were you?
I was, but I didn't think... You know, you get used to watching, like, the type of M. Night Shyamalan twists that are almost gimmicky. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking more for that kind of twist. I didn't think that what they did was going to be so thematically kind of coherent as what they did.
I did think at the beginning of the movie that Amy Adams was not old enough to have a daughter of that age.
I thought that
So there was a moment I was like, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then, moved on to whatever was going on in the plot. So what did you think?
So it's a slow burn. You know, I think... And one of the first questions I had when I watched it was, okay, I really like this, but is your casual moviegoer going to love it as much as I did? Because it takes patience, and it pays off in the end, I think. But you have to kind of let the setup happen before the payoff comes.
Agreed. The few reviews I've seen kept commenting that it was a very adult film. Like, it wasn't a film about aliens that didn't involve, like, too much blowing stuff up or anything like that. So I have to admit that I was looking for this. Somebody else I know saw the movie, and when they went into see it, the ticket attendant was like, I can just give you a refund now. Everyone's complaining that the movie is just really blurry and dark.
I wonder if that's just a problem with the theater because...
No, I think it's people don't understand wide aperture, which was frequently used. Like, very often it was very wide aperture and most of the background was out of focus. So, but I'm like...
weren't a lot of Terrence Malick fans in that theater.
Yeah, apparently not. I'm like, that's just embarrassing for people that they didn't get that was a cinematic technique. Mm-hmm. But then when I was watching it, I was thinking like, okay, I'm already looking for this cinematic technique. What do I think that means thematically?
Well, had you seen any movies by, and forgive me if I botched the pronunciation of the director's name, but Denis Villeneuve before?
I don't think I have.
So the two I've seen were Prisoners and Sicario.
Oh, that's right. No, I'm blocking it out. I did see Sicario and I hated it.
Really? So I watched it after Arrival because I was like, I want to see more. I had seen Prisoners before, and to me, Prisoners is one of the most criminally underrated movies of the last, 5 years. Okay. So, I mean, it's dark and it's twisted, and you will walk out of the theater feeling icky, but you can't stop thinking about it. And so that was my first exposure to him as a director. And then Sicario I actually liked quite a bit, although, you do have to suspend a little disbelief at certain points, but I mean, shot beautifully, and spoiler
alert on Sicario. She was too dumb to live, and she lived, and I'm still angry about that.
That was the flaw.
She was
with that
literally
movie.
Too dumb to live, and I'm like, I can't believe she didn't get killed. I'm still mad.
Absolutely. So, there are three very different types of films, though. That's what's so interesting about his whole body of work. And so with Arrival, I think my question was I really expected it to be more like his past work, and it really was a huge departure. I mean, it was more like a Christopher Nolan movie in a way.
Yeah, so it's funny. Fans of the podcast, I did get to go see this movie with Stacy. Since we don't do the podcast together anymore, we can go see the movies now. Yeah. And she brought up that it reminded her a lot of Interstellar, which I haven't seen because I'm not that big a fan of Christopher Nolan.
this movie reminded me of a couple of movies, Interstellar being one of them and Contact being the other. I think those are the two most obvious kind of comparison points. And so in tone, it doesn't share a lot in common with them. I mean, they're all going for the realistic alien movie, right? But this one has a little bit of that kind of that foreboding that really comes out of more of a movie like Independence Day, right? Mm-hmm. You get these ships floating over the cities of the world, and there's kind of this sense of doom, whereas I think Contact and Interstellar were more about a sense of hope and even a sense of awe. And you get little doses of that with Arrival, but only in the end, right? Until then, it's almost like Hitchcockian, and it's kind of slow build-up of suspense.
Yeah, if I had one complaint, was the seriousness of which everybody took this. I don't like unrelenting bleakness. I actually find it unrealistic. Like, lots of people cut the tension by making a joke.
Right.
So, but for this one, I mean, there was a little bit from Jeremy Renner's character, but I'm like, where is the person like Peter Coyote and E.T. who's like, I have waited my entire life for this moment. This is so kick-ass. I'm going to meet an alien.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. And part of maybe what that is that, we see this through the eyes of Amy Adams, and, here's where we get into a little bit, I guess, the plot. This works well because she comes into the plot after it's already started. She's not one of the people in the front lines during the first meeting with the aliens. So when she comes in, it's as part of a team where she's kind of the rookie among them, right? And everybody else knows what they're facing, what's about to happen, and she doesn't. And so I think that's a very effective device because it amplifies kind of the uneasiness of her character, and she basically puts her in our shoes. Right? So that was nice, but
I mean, I believe it from her that she's like worried and scared and has a sense of foreboding and isn't super excited about aliens. But the fact that nobody was just kind of got on my nerves.
Well, I think that's it. That's the trade-off, is that, so everybody else in that room but her, and I guess Jeremy Renner's character, had already seen these things. It was kind of, old hat to them by this point. So you don't get that sense of awe that I was talking about with, say, Contact or Interstellar.
Sure. But so back to the wide aperture and having only, the character at the moment in focus. The problem I had with that is that while I was watching the movie, I was thinking, oh, what a great, like, a metaphor for grief, it's like everything is hazy around you. And then I realized that wasn't going to work. Like, that actually isn't a good explanation for what was going on.
Well,
so thematically, I'm not sure why that was used so much in the film, other than to say, I don't know. What did you think?
I think it was a visual.
You just think
thing.
It was a visual?
Yeah.
But usually, I mean, a good director will use the visual to match the theme.
Sure. I mean, I think that, I think there was an effort to marry it to that theme because, I mean, getting into, I guess, the rest of the development of the plot, Amy Adams' character, as you come into the movie, the first scenes you see are scenes of her having a baby, and then you see the child growing up, and you can sense through all of this that there's some kind of tragedy going on, and that's largely, I think, because of the score, which is kind of...
Yeah, the score was a little much in this.
It was very heavy. I mean, it was beautiful.
Especially at the end with them together. I was like, back off. Like, back off music.
Right. But it is the hint that you get in those early scenes that this child is not going to live. I mean, it is not a big surprise when 5 minutes into the movie, her child dies.
Right.
So... and I mean, this is part of the ingeniousness of the movie, is that is the way the grief storyline keeps coming in to the storyline about her trying to converse with the aliens, and the way it ultimately pays off in the twist.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think just the aliens themselves are very hazy, and they're behind this like smoky glass. So like, being out of focus, not really knowing what's going on, not being able to see the whole picture, I think, if I had to guess, that was what they were trying to say with that camera work.
It did enhance the sense of mystery of the whole thing, I guess you could say. I mean, and that goes to like the shots of the aliens in the room. So they meet with the aliens in a room. The aliens are on the other side of a glass wall, kind of enshrouded in a mist, and you only kind of get passing glimpses of them as they try to communicate. And the way the aliens do that is by using a written language that they kind of inject out of ink, almost like a squid.
Yeah.
And it forms... I thought that was actually really cool.
I did too. I liked that.
Well, I mean, just the level of detail that went into kind of formulating the linguistic theory behind the whole movie. And this is a movie, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, about linguistics. I mean, it's more of a linguistics movie than a sci-fi movie in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's about communication and language and what that all means, and we'll get into that a little bit, you know. That'll be what we talk about when we get into the larger thematic issues. But also the aliens didn't have a face.
Yeah. Right.
Which was really... I appreciated that because I thought, oh, great. Like, if you give it a face, then it can have facial expressions and then it can connect with that or disconnect, you know, feel, oh, it's an evil-looking alien or it's a whatever type of alien, or now I'm sympathetic to the alien because the alien looks sad.
Right.
And they didn't give it a face, so, like, you couldn't really connect to it as any kind of creature, which I thought was great. You know, it really kept you... as language and their written stuff and their behavior as the only way that you connected with the aliens.
Right. It was essential to the design of the aliens themselves, and they're called heptapods in the movie because they have 7 legs. They're kind of like a squid, but with 7 legs. The design,
or a large hand, according to Stacy, which isn't wrong either.
Yeah, sure. You know, the design, I think, was, you know, intentional to maintain a separation between them and us, right? And I mean, that was a huge part of the movie, and it does set this off from the typical sci-fi movies we see where aliens are always just a humanoid with maybe ridges on the forehead or tippy ears or, you know, something like that just to maintain some kind of visual separation. These are
and not have to pay for a ton of special effects.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So, you know, we're getting into, I mean, think about this. If we ever really do encounter an alien life form, chances are it's going to be something completely different than anything we can imagine because it will have evolved in a completely different environment than anything we've ever seen. So, yeah. I thought that was actually very cool.
Yeah, I did too. I appreciated that they went off, you know, kind of off book and made an alien unlike any alien I've seen in a movie. And I appreciated that. So, I mean, I think it was a solid movie. The performances were good. The cinematography, like I said, I got a little bit tired of the blurriness. I'm not going to lie. Like, the shots were just too similar scene to scene. But overall, like, just a solid effort. You know, I don't have any big complaints. The score got a little ham-handed as well.
Well, and to me, I don't think I noticed the kind of the cinematography, the blurriness that you're describing as much as I noticed the kind of the editing. And there were scenes that you got the point, and then the scene dragged on for another 2 minutes just to make sure you really got the point.
Fair enough,
and
yeah.
So there were some times where I thought pacing was an issue. Yeah, I mean, it was under 2 hours. I mean, I think it's like 1:56, I would say. And so it's not... You almost feel like they're dragging out some of these scenes for length. But I mean, so I think the movie drags at times, but at least it doesn't drag and it's long too, which is always the worst combination if you're a casual moviegoer. And this is what I was talking about when I raised the question of whether kind of a casual, even sci-fi fan going into this, are they going to really enjoy this, or is this really more of a movie for the thinking person?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what the casual sci-fi fan is like. I'm the sort of intellectual sci-fi fan,
me too.
And the movie person. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say the major complaint I have, and part of me wonders if this was intentional because they didn't want to spoil the ending, but boy, Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, zero chemistry there.
Yeah.
Zero.
I kind of agree.
Just nothing. And like I said, I could see if they were trying to do that because they didn't want to be, you know, spoil it that they were going to end up together. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I'm like, you can't. It just seems so unrealistic that they would end up together.
Well, and I don't buy that it was an effort to avoid a spoiler, because I think I saw it coming from maybe 5 minutes after he comes on screen that they're going to end up getting together on this. So, you know, it wasn't a huge surprise. And they kind of try to play it as a big reveal at the end when you find out that Jeremy Renner is actually the father of her child and that the child was born in the future. But but you can totally see it coming well before that reveal ever comes, so it doesn't exactly hit with the impact that I think they're thinking it's supposed to hit with. Right?
Yeah, I would say Stacey and I both said that when she's like, call your father, he's the scientist. Mm-hmm. That was the moment where I was like, But, I mean, I generally like Jeremy Renner.
Yeah.
Someone said that he was kind of a blank, which maybe is true. I haven't seen him in that many things, but I was just like, gosh, these two leads, they're not playing off of each other.
Neither one of them is a bad actor, and even in this movie. It's just that I don't know. And part of it is, I think, there's an effort to maintain an emotional remoteness in this whole movie. Part of it's intentional for Amy Adams' character. She's dealing with grief.
But she's not.
But
she's like remembering grief that didn't happen.
Well, but she is. I think kind of the way we're supposed to understand the storyline, I guess this starts to get into the big reveal now, is that...
everyone's been warned, Spencer. Yes, we're all good.
All right, fine. So the catch of the movie is that the heptapods think in non-linear time. And the kind of the philosophical thing with this movie is that by learning to understand another language, you start to think like the culture that created it. So as Amy Adams learns more about this language of the heptapods, she starts to think in non-linear time herself. And that doesn't just go forward, you have to remember, it goes backwards. So these flashbacks that she's having earlier in the movie, before she's even started learning this language, about a dead child, she doesn't know why she's having these images in her mind, but it is her thinking about this before the events of the movie. So she does feel that grief, and presumably going back maybe even her whole life. I don't know exactly how this is intended to work, but I think she's feeling that grief early on, and I think that leads to her emotional remoteness. You have that scene where she's talking to her mother on the phone before she ever goes to meet the aliens, and you can just kind of tell that she's off and her mom's worried about her, and so I think that's supposed to let us know that this is something that goes further back in her life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I just that they didn't introduce that she has, because I was thinking that, like, when is she having these memories? It's been since the beginning of the movie. She hasn't even learned the heptapod language yet.
Right.
So, I did like this eternal sunshine of the spotless mind of, like, even if you knew everything that was going to happen and that it wasn't going to turn out well, that you'd still do it anyway.
Right.
And I like the reveal that actually they play this very subtly, that she at some point tells Jeremy Renner that the daughter's going to die, and I guess he gets really upset and can't handle it and kind of disconnects from the daughter because he doesn't want to have to go through that loss. Mm-hmm. So you see that he's angry at her for telling him. So you see him make the opposite decision of, I don't want to know the future, and if I knew the future, I'd make different decisions. I wouldn't just let it play out.
It kind of ties into something I think you mentioned on your podcast about the lobster, right? And this, you mentioned another movie you'd seen where I think it's called Timers or something like that.
Yeah.
And so people are, implanted with something that tells them that when they will meet the love of their life. And, that sounds great, but, knowing the future can be bad as well as good, right?
Right. It has its consequences. And then do you make those same decisions again or do you not? Mm-hmm. And I also like in the sense of, I hate time travel movies where people actually can change the time trajectory. That seems unrealistic to me. Like, it had to have already happened this way to get you to that point in the present. So the fact, and that, I'm sorry, I'll bring this up, but all I could think of in the scene where the Chinese general is talking to her and telling her something that in the future that she's going to need in the present of the movie was like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Where they're like, oh, we'll go back and throw the garbage can, and then the garbage can appears and they're saved. And I'm like, yes.
See, like, you view this as a negative and I view it as a positive, so...
No, I'm saying it's a total positive. I was like, yes! Yeah. They brought in the Bill and Ted thing, like, yay!
Yeah.
No, total positive. The fact that the timeline has to occur that way. I was super excited.
Well, this movie, it seems like an alien movie, but really it's more about two themes. Communication is one, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, and the other is time.
Right.
And so one of the other ways to look at this movie is to compare it to other time travel movies, right?
Yep.
So, I thought, we're starting to see this trend of it. Used to it was the whole changing the past thing with, like, say, Terminator and movies like that. And actually Terminator you could mark as kind of the transition point from the old style time travel storyline to the new one where there's a circle, right? Where you have the events of the movie causing the future events that then cause the events of the movie. So, there are other ones like that. 12 Monkeys is a good example. Or,
oh boy, I haven't seen 12 Monkeys in a long time.
Or Looper, or even Donnie Darko. Predestination, if you've seen that, which is kind of an indie one.
No, I haven't seen that one. But again, there's a great article out there on, why Back to the Future is crazy, where he, like, Marty comes back and his whole life is completely different and his family is completely different. And you're like, but he would have gone in the past and it would, like, it doesn't make sense that that's true.
Right.
So I don't like where, Brian Greene fans, I'm sorry, I don't believe in the multiverse. I think that's crap. It just doesn't seem plausible to me. I'm not a theoretical physicist. Apologies to everybody. So yeah, I agree with you. Like, if you're evaluating this film as a sci-fi film, you also have to think of it as a time travel film.
Well, I think one of the more satisfying things about the twist here, though, for me at least, was that I feel like this came the closest I've seen on film to getting right the notion that it is all one timeline.
Yeah, right? I agree. That was
to the point where different parts of the story are all playing out in different points in the timeline from the narrative's sake at the same time.
Yeah, I thought that they did that well. I have no complaints about this as a time travel film.
Yeah.
So, moving to some of the larger thematic issues about communication, sure. I was a little frustrated that, first of all, Russia and China are the bad guys.
Yeah, it was kind of ham-handed the way they did that, I thought.
I was like, it couldn't have been Botswana and Romania, right? Like, It had to be China and Russia. And so I was sort of glad that the Chinese kind of come through for everybody in the end. That made up for it a little bit with me. But in a way, this movie is very timely in terms of the election and the fact-free campaign that Trump won and that, just fear of immigrants basically won the day. Fear of a lot of things. And that this movie, you have the terrorist attack, which was very nail-biting. I thought they did a good job of creating suspense in that scene. We're not talking to each other anymore.
Right. I think so. I went and saw this movie the Friday after the election thinking, okay, I need a good, hopeful movie to get my mind off of what's going on in the real world. And I'm sad to say this movie was not that movie. I mean, it really kind of plays into a lot of the same themes in terms of a lot of the drama comes from Amy Adams trying her best to keep, to win out over the forces of ignorance that are trying to be reactionary. I thought they did a good job in terms of like bringing in things like they had the clip of the right wing web journalist who's saying, I think the president needs to take action and show we mean business here and all this stuff. And they showed some of the reactionary elements within society and how if we really did have an alien invasion, even if it was a peaceful one, how certain elements of our society would react to that.
Well, in that. You think that you can defeat a species that has already gotten interstellar travel worked out.
Sure.
But our puny weapons are going to win the day.
Right. Well, and that's why I thought, too, when the whole thing, the drama of the Chinese are about to attack their alien ship, it's like, really, is this even going to do anything? But
I feel like the Chinese are smarter than that.
Yeah, I think so, too. So credit to the Chinese on this. I think that... the other kind of the if you want to call it the Trump factor in this movie as you watch it, though, is just the notion of speaking past each other. And, a lot of the movie involves, not just, the aliens and Amy Adams speaking past each other before bridging the gap, but also the different world governments speaking past each other and how misunderstandings can happen. I think that makes the movie in a way more powerful, the timing in which it came out.
Yeah. Well, so she has this line in the beginning of the movie about ask this other linguist what war is in Sanskrit and what he thinks the definition is.
Right.
And he's like, the definition is an argument, and she says the definition is desire for more cows.
Yes. Which I would love to look up and find out.
I know. I didn't fact check that because she tells a big whopper in another scene.
Yeah, with the kangaroo thing. Yeah.
So yeah, in the communication thing, this election was about immigration and fear mongering, and to me, I'm like, why is everybody so afraid of immigrants? And I feel like that was what immigrants means, and all of that has like a completely different definition to some people than it does to the people who have grown up in cities and gotten used to multiculturalism and are completely fine with like different people living in their city. And so it's like we're not even speaking the same language anymore. We have different definitions for the same words.
Well, and I think that's true of our politics too. I mean, and one of the themes you're hearing in kind of the post-election analysis of why Hillary lost is, have liberals done a poor job of communicating and reaching out to the white middle class, working class voter? And there's this notion that they need to do more outreach and that they need to be more understanding of points of view expressed by the voters who elected Trump. And to me, that almost seems faulty because, it's demanding tolerance on the part of the people who don't want to tolerate intolerance.
There's that, and there's also, again, I literally had a disagreement with a friend on Facebook who is a fellow economist who I know from graduate school. And at one point in our argument said, well, I don't need statistics to know that blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I'm an economist. I don't function without evidence. Like, right. You literally just said to me, I'm not going to argue you on facts.
Well,
I don't even know where to go with that. And I feel like, yeah, there's been a lot of things you have to understand where these people are coming from. I'm like, I agree that I have to understand, but my point of view is like, and then I have to work around. Mm-hmm. Like, free trade didn't kill anybody's job.
Right.
Mechanization did. Like, your jobs got taken by robots, not by Chinese people. And hello, welcome to your now $2,000 iPhone if you don't want to build anything in China anymore.
I made the exact same argument to somebody. So, and when I watched the movie then, I'm thinking, okay, so this really kind of plays out as a metaphor for our politics too, because, and I don't think this is intentional, I think it just was, happenstance. But that, we're really speaking past each other, and the kind of the core message of the movie that your language influences your thinking and vice versa really is happening in this kind of divide between conservatives and liberals in this country. Like, we can't communicate with each other because we think so differently from each other about these issues that even a rational argument can't ever take place.
Right. No, and I agree with that. And I will say, I've said this before about language, and I agree with the message of the film 100%. I've lived that message. I studied abroad, and when I studied abroad, everything occurred in Spanish. I only spoke it. I pretty much only wrote it. My spelling declined horribly in English, and it sort of never came back. And when I came home and people asked me what the experience was like, it's like I didn't know how to talk about it in English because I had the whole experience in Spanish. And I'm a much nicer person in Spanish. Like, seriously, I am. It's like, it does change how you think, because the words that are and concepts that are available to you are different. So I really loved that message. It resonated with me as someone who spoke another language. But the solution presented in the movie is everybody learns this other language and we have this totally mind-expanding way of thinking about things. Right. I don't know if that's possible.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, at the very least, it takes good faith on both sides of the disconnect. I mean, one of the things that was kind of annoying from a logical perspective, at least in terms of evaluating the characters' motivations in this movie, is that you've got everybody but Amy Adams not seeming to understand that these aliens were very clearly here with a peaceful intent. And it's like, I mean, they've been there for weeks now, coming to meet with you every 18 hours and trying with great patience to communicate with you, and you still think that there's some fear that they're here to, wipe us out in some kind of a military-style invasion. It's like, they were going to do that. They wouldn't have sat around for a month waiting to start it, right? So you think that would have at least bought the good faith that the Chinese and the Russians in the movie don't seem to get.
Yeah, and I also, at some point, the whole U.S. military packs up was like, we gotta go. I'm like, those aliens literally saved their lives.
Yeah.
They knew the bomb was there, and they push, Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner out the thing, and I'm like...
And one of them dies as a result.
And I'm like, why are we still thinking the aliens are bad?
Dies as a result.
Yeah. So I was sort of like, that seems really unfair.
Right. I mean, where's the State Department in all this? Where are the diplomats? Because they certainly weren't allowed to...
They're on their private email server, and they didn't...
Sure. We can't allow that anymore. I'm betting one of the other cultural non-movie references you thought of while watching this was the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode Darmok. You remember that one?
I don't remember things by episode title. You'll have to give me more
there's
information.
The one where Picard is trapped on a planet with an alien whose language is so different than ours that the universal translators can't translate it.
Okay.
So, and they speak through metaphor is the kind of the basis of the language, the alien language. And so he has to, over the course of this, come through and kind of figure out how to communicate with a being under kind of trying circumstances. And that I thought a lot about that episode of watching this, because you had that same thing of a completely alien, if you will, language. Nothing, it's alien not just in terms of the words, but in terms of the structure.
Yeah. Well, and again, back to the Chinese, one of the things I found frustrating is because I had that experience of studying abroad and learning another language, I would always say to people, the Chinese have a saying, he who learns another language gains another soul. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, again, you have the Chinese being the bad guy of not understanding communication. I'm like, is there a freaking saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. The Chinese gave us fireworks. Yeah, lay off the Chinese.
Well, I guess this is going to make me think twice whenever I'm back home and I hear, I'm from Texas and hear people say things like, these immigrants need to come here and learn our language, which I've always found to be, just annoying beyond belief. But, I guess there's an element in which we all need to learn each other's languages if we really want to kind of start to communicate, not just on a linguistic level, but on an understanding level.
Well, that's what I find so frustrating. So, my parents each have the polar opposite immigrant experience where my dad didn't learn Italian and they just were like assimilate. And my mom's native language was Yiddish and she didn't learn English until she went to school, and she lived in this total enclave where no one assimilated or got out of their wholly Jewish environment. So I've seen sort of in my life, in my background, both of those things play out. But I feel like everybody knows a handful of Yiddish at this point just from watching frickin' Seinfeld.
I learned many Yiddish words through Seinfeld, yes.
And everybody, if I said amigo, I don't think there's a person in America who wouldn't know what the word amigo meant. And so, to me, I think the most difficult piece of this and what the movie tries to address is, how are we not better? How are things not more interesting? How are we not richer and have better food to eat, frankly, by being inclusive? And so when you hear the people I just want my town to stay exactly the way it was. Right. I'm like, why would you want that? And that's, to me, the fundamental disconnect.
Well, I think one of the interesting twists of the movie is that the reason the aliens are here is purely to help us, but it's also a self-interested thing. In 3,000 years, they say, because they have this non-linear understanding of time, we're going to be the ones to save them.
Yeah.
And so they have to start that loop now. And I think that, I guess the message you could take from that is there really is something for both sides in trying to understand one another.
Yes, excellent introduction of the term zero-sum game.
Yes. Yeah.
As an economist, it was like, yeah.
I bet you wanted to scream at the screen.
Like,
the scene where Amy Adams can't remember that term.
It was like, game theory, hooray!
Yeah.
Everybody get more educated. Well, I mean, it remains to be seen. To allude to another Chinese saying, I keep saying we're living under that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times.
Right. I wish they'd be a little less interesting right now, actually.
So it's all been interesting. And to, just go completely egotistical, self-aggrandizing, this is the second time I've been out of the country for an election, and the second time that the popular vote did not go to the person who won the electoral college.
So if you could only leave during off election years, that would be great.
Yeah, I need to not be abroad.
Yeah.
So I was abroad in 2000, which is awkward because I know nothing about how that election played out because I wasn't in America.
Yeah.
And even talking about this election when you say Trump won, did he win?
No.
What is the definition of winning it?
Sure.
Again, language. He didn't win the popular vote.
Right.
So
didn't even come close.
Again, it's what does win mean?
Well, and what if you were trying to define American values right now, how do you do that? I mean, it's almost impossible because we are so divided and because the measure is in the eye of the beholder in all these instances. I mean, everyone is telling those who are so upset about the election to, quit whining because you lost, but there's a legitimate point here that, well, we didn't, and this is all coming from the group of people that were insisting that the election was going to be rigged before it happened. So
yeah.
There's a lot of irony in all of this, and we don't want to make this too much of a political discussion here, I'm sure, but these are the thoughts that you're having when you watch this
matter.
movie.
Dig in, Spencer.
Well, that like I said, I went to this movie wanting to get away from this, and it actually made me think about all these issues even more deeply than I probably would have without the movie.
Well, I think so. And to harken back to my earlier point about nobody being super excited, it definitely gives you the impression of oh God, they're aliens. And I think that really worked for Amy Adams' character, but I do find it frustrating because I would be like, holy shit, they're aliens! I'm with you. I've waited my entire life for this. The only reason I want to be immortal is because one of these days we're going to meet aliens. And I need to make sure that I'm alive when that happens because it's going to be awesome and cool.
Well, you need to see Contact and Interstellar then.
Oh, I freaking hated Contact.
Oh,
I did see Contact.
I love that movie.
That's a separate discussion.
Okay.
So yeah, I've alluded to this in previous podcasts. I'm solidly the Star Trek kind of sci-fi person. Although, stay tuned, Movies That Matter fans. I will be seeing Rogue One and a future podcast with a future co-host. And I will have many negative things to say about the Star Wars franchise. I don't like it. I don't think it's sci-fi. I think it's fantasy. So I do think this message was bleak, and I'm sorry that you were looking for something hopeful, but I do appreciate the sort of straight sci-fi aspect of it, and the time frame stuff was correct, and it wasn't, some silly alien and that was just such a departure from reality. People were afraid of aliens. People would be afraid of aliens in this country. It's clear. Although I do think some people would, again, be like, hey, cool, aliens. Rock on. Yeah. Probably not the military, though.
And I think this movie probably is one of the more satisfying sci-fi movies for a Trek school.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
I come from the same school. I like Star Wars and the defense of Star Wars here, too. I don't think that you have to pick between the two, but I think I definitely more closely align with that more intellectual, hopeful style of sci-fi.
Yeah. So, coming to the end of our podcast, we'll do recommendations. Do you have any recommendations?
Well, I had a couple here. I thought of number one on the kind of the time loop situation here. I just watched, it's a classic of French cinema called La Jetée from the 60s, and it's kind of, it was actually a model for the movie 12 Monkeys later on, but it has this whole notion of circular time, and it's a short film. It's only, it's under 30 minutes.
Oh, neat.
But worth checking out if you're kind of a film history fan.
Cool.
Similar lines, actually, but more on the language front, is a movie called Hiroshima Mon Amour.
Oh, I've never seen that, and it's such a classic in cinema.
It is. It's, it predates that kind of the French New Wave thing in the 60s, but, it really is about two people from completely different cultures, French and Japanese, speaking to each other and understanding each other. And there's no sci-fi element at all in this movie, but it's, very deep and it's very poignant, and it really gets at that kind of core theme of this movie too, of, how where you're from and the language you speak shapes the person that you are. So recommend that. And then in terms of a think piece type of sci-fi movie, I also wanted to throw out there just last year's Ex Machina, which I think...
Oh, interesting. I would go Ex Machina.
Oh, yeah. Well,
who knows?
So I having learned Latin in a previous life, I would say that that actually is the correct pronunciation. So it's kind of up to the ear of the beholder. But yeah, and I think it appeals to the same audience as Arrival.
Well, speaking of circular time, before I give my recommendation, I recommended Show Me a Hero on the last podcast, which I did see with Spencer. So my recommendation, getting deep into the time travel thing, if you haven't seen it, it really is only one thing to say about the movie Primer, and everyone will say it, which is it's the most realistic movie anyone's made about time travel.
Right, and I still haven't seen it, and it's been recommended to me 1,000 times.
With that recommendation,
it's on the to-do list, yes.
Where everyone's like, but it's just the most realistic movie. Yeah. And it's I don't want to go into the whole thing. It's got a fascinating background that it was literally made by this guy and his two engineer friends, which is why it's so realistic. Honestly, you see the credits and it's literally a loop of the same three people. It's like they're the actors, they're the cameramen, gives
you hope that someday you can make a movie too, right?
Well, he got like multi-million-dollar offers after that because it's been this sort of sleeper cult film, right. And he was like, no, we just kind of did this thing to screw around, and that was it. But it is a really fun, interesting time travel movie, and it's unlike any other time travel movie out there. So that's my recommendation. So now we come to the impact score of this movie. So to remind you of the scale, a score, it goes from 1 to 10. A score of 1 is... no one's ever going to see this movie or talk about it, and no one will be at all changed because of it. 10 is life and movies as we know it have been forever altered by this movie. So what score would you give it?
Yeah, that's a tough question on this. I think it's a 4 for me. It's which sounds like a low score, but it's not. This is a movie with big, thoughtful ideas that I think can continue to matter to people. I just don't know that the movie itself is kind of a moment of a cinematic, historical, whatever. I think, it'll be a movie we'll remember fondly, but it's not going to change the way we look at anything.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to give it a 2. It was a solidly made film, and there's nothing wrong with just going to the movies and seeing a good movie. Yeah. But in the whole, we live in a bubble, right? That's the other thing that we didn't address in this podcast, but I keep getting accused of living in a bubble, to which I want to respond, yes, none of my friends are bigots. Like, I'm quite happy in my bubble.
Terrible bubble to live in.
Yeah. I have no intention of befriending a bigot on Facebook or any other platform so that I cannot live in a bubble. Like, I have values and morals, and I don't want those people in my life. Not to mention the fact that if they're super bigoted, they're probably not going to appreciate my life.
Right.
And so I don't know that people will think about language and fear. I think this is a preaching to the choir. Anybody receptive to this message already has it, and I don't think that anybody non-receptive to this message is going to see this movie at all and like it. I think there will be people who complain it was blurry and dark and just shut down.
Well, that's a good point. I think the people that are most likely to find it boring are the people that probably need its message the most, sadly. So
yeah, but I just don't think they're going to get it. Right. So I don't want to give it a negative impact score. That would just be cruel, but I just don't think it's going to reach people.
But it really was, I thought, a great film. That's,
Yeah, go see it. I would say, it's, well, just go see movies, you know. I like movies, go to the theater.
Sure, but I think this one in particular is important for us to urge people to go see because in this era of cheap Hollywood blockbusters appealing to the lowest common denominator, this one didn't do that. It really did try to appeal to the best in our natures, and I think that we need more movies like that, and so I want to see it financially succeed for that so that we see more such movies.
I can't argue with a single thing you just said. Yes, fair enough. Adult movies that are intellectually stimulating on a larger budget, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be some tiny little movie that only, again, bubble, right, people who happen to have an independent theater can see. That's not fair to the rest of people who like good movies and adult films where they have to think and interpret. Agreed. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And recommend it to your friends. If you want to holler at me, you can get my Twitter account off our webpage, www.moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. I'm at Funarini on Twitter, or leave a comment on any of the episode posts on the website.
And you can reach me. You can follow the website at shadowsandnoise.com, or you can also find me on Twitter at Shadows and Noise.
Thank you for listening. Remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.